Okay, we're officially underway here. Let me share my screen if I can figure out how to do that. Where am I? There we go. Okay, as everybody seeing, everybody should be seeing the tracker, and please feel free to ask questions as we go along. We've got a nice small group, so that's really good.
Yep.
And let me see here, where is the meeting stuff? Okay.
Hear me okay now, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry about all that.
No worries. Yeah, so like I say, it's probably good if right now it's nice and quiet, but it's usually better if people mute their mics when they're not asking a question.
Yeah, we're on the headset now, so.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start just with a real brief introduction of the Bug Squad. I don't know how much experience different people have here, but the Bug Squad started before I joined Joomla in 2008. I think it started probably a couple years before that. I'm not 100% sure. And I've been coordinator of the Bug Squad since 2009. And I mean, basically, the Bug Squad manages the issues tracker and is responsible for fixing bugs and releasing new versions of Joomla. And we also help with the feature tracker as well. And basically, the deal with the Bug Squad is that just about anybody that is knowledgeable of Joomla can join the Bug Squad and help out. You don't have to be a technical person. You don't have to be a programmer. All you need to do is know enough Joomla to be able to play with things and test things. And then you need to be willing to learn some basics about the version control and using Git and using patches and stuff. But with basically a pretty small learning curve, you can be very helpful in the Bug Squad. And the great thing about being in the Bug Squad is there's no minimum time commitment. I mean, people if you can just do a few hours every now and again, that's great. Some people spend, hours every day working on stuff. That's great too. And it's really, we want to make it a fun and friendly group, and I think for the most part it is. And there's a tremendous amount of knowledge in a lot of the experienced people that work in the Bug Squad. So it's really a great way for people to learn about Joomla, particularly people who want to learn more about the coding side and the inner workings of how things work. So kind of the value proposition for joining the Bug Squad is, you get to contribute to a really valuable part of the project, and hopefully you get to work with some fun and knowledgeable people and have a chance to learn more about coding in Joomla. And a lot of the people who are really experienced and valuable contributors on the code side of the project started with in the Bug Squad, and many of them still, contribute to the Bug Squad. People like Jean-Marie, Ewan, Gergo, Reuven, Michael, Ofer, Matt Thomas, Christoph, and a bunch of others. And a lot of those people did not know that much about coding before they started working in the Bug Squad. So hopefully it's a win-win for everybody. And we do take the code of conduct very seriously. We want the Bug Squad to be a friendly, welcoming, place to work, and not somewhere where people have to, be worried about what they say or afraid of making a mistake or something like that. So if you ever run across any problems like that in that area, please let me know right away. And of course, the Bug Squad is essential to the continuing success of the project. Okay, so how many people here are primarily interested in helping with testing versus primarily interested in helping with coding or with monitoring the tracker? Can you just get a quick, maybe everybody can just...
I want to do the coding more than, well, both actually, but I'm still real weak and way far behind.
Well, yes, if you want to eventually do the coding, then the best way to do that is to start with testing or tracker work and then work your way into the coding.
Yeah, I just fell so far behind after 1.6 that now I'm almost starting from square zero again.
Yeah, okay. Okay, anybody else? I've heard from... Okay. So, okay, let's just go through the process real quick in the tracker just to make sure everybody kind of understands, and then we'll maybe a couple quick tricks and tips and tricks in the tracker, and then maybe we can jump into the Git work cycle. And like I say, if you have questions as we go along, if there's something else you want to cover, please let me know. Okay, so you're all familiar with the tracker here, and you can all see this. I mean, basically, if you had to summarize what the bug squad's work is in a nutshell, it would be moving issues through the tracker. Issues come in the tracker typically as open issues that are reported, and then eventually we want them to move to ready to commit. And then one of the committers, myself or JM or Christoph, will commit them. So the bug squad's primary work is to take issues that start off with status open and move them all the way to ready to commit. And basically, if we break that down by team, I mean, you can think about the fact that the tracker team or people working in the tracker are primarily trying to get things from opened to confirmed, meaning that somebody on the bug squad has confirmed the issue, so now it's ready for a coder. And then people on the coding team are trying to move issues from confirmed to pending status, and pending means that we've got a proposed patch that fixes the problem. Problem's been duplicated, and there's test instructions. And then, of course, the testing team's job is to move things from pending to ready to commit. And we've added, hopefully we all know this by now, but for example, let me pull this up here. We've added, when you do a test, you want to put this @test in there because that helps us pick up on the stats. And then also we added this a few months ago, I guess. If you do a test, make sure you check whether it's the first test or the second test, because that's really handy for seeing which items need, like for example, one of the things that's good to do is to find things that have one test and just need a second test. That's sometimes a quick way to move things to ready to commit. So when you test something, make sure you put the @test in the comment and then check the appropriate box there. Okay, and like I said, then the last step is committers, and that's something you guys don't have to worry about. We'll take care of that. And that really is pretty easy. If the rest of the processes work correctly, the committing is pretty easy. Okay, so some tips and tricks on the tracker, just to make sure, and probably most of you know this, but obviously we can use these category codes and status codes to filter the thing. So if we're looking for pending items to test, for example, you just go there and hit browse, and now you'll see all the pendings, and you can sort it by priority or by date or whatever. You can also use queries. We have some queries that we've written, and we can write more. How many people have ever either written a query or used a query?
Not me. Well, I take it back. I've used one once.
Okay. So, for example, if I want to see all of the items that need one test, I can just click there, and now this is the list of items that need that. If I want to see how that query works, I can click on the query here, and you can create a new query. Now, I'm not sure if everybody will be able to. Jason's asking, is it possible to search by user? No, I'm not aware of an easy way to search by user. Unfortunately, the search in this tracker is not very good, and that's one of the reasons why we've been looking at the possibility of replacing it. But it's like a lot of things. This tracker does a lot of things well and a few things very poorly, so that's kind of a mixed bag. But basically, anybody can create a query, and it's just a way of creating a list, and you can select or sort or select by status and category and any of the other fields, so you can get a quick list of things. So if you're trying to do something, if you just want to filter, by one of these columns, you don't need a query. But if you want to do anything a little fancier, like with a date range or something like that, you can use a query. And if there's some standard queries that you'd like to see, we can add some standard queries. Yeah, you can filter by assignee. We don't really use the assignee that much. It's kind of the problem with assignee is that a lot of times people will assign something and then either forget to unassign it, or they don't get around to it, or whatever, and then other people look at that and think that somebody else is already working on it, which may or may not be true. So generally speaking, we don't really need that field. If you want to work on something, usually you can just go ahead and work on it. If you're afraid that somebody else might work on it in the meantime, you can always drop in a comment to say, hey, I'm working on a patch and it should be done by, in a day or two, or whenever you expect it to be done. Okay, and then another really important thing that I always forget to tell people is everybody familiar with, well, let me find one here okay, is everybody familiar with this link over here, monitor item?
Nope.
Okay, that is a really important thing. If you open a new tracker issue, if you create a new tracker issue, you are automatically notified anytime anybody posts or makes changes to that item. But if you just go in and post a question or post a patch or post a comment to a tracker item, you will not automatically be notified of changes to that unless you click this monitor item. So I always try to remember whenever I'm working on a particular item, and then if you're already monitoring it, then the link changes to stop monitoring. But if I'm working on an item, I always try to remember to click that monitor item, and that way I'll get an email anytime that item changes. Now, some people that are really into this monitor the tracker, which you can also do by clicking out here. When you're in the list view, you can hit monitor tracker. But I'm here to tell you that if you do that, you're going to just get, it's like, trying to put your mouth to a fire hose. You're going to get a lot of emails. So I generally just monitor selected items that I've worked on or want to keep track of. So that's a real handy thing as well. So basically, you can use status codes, queries, category, and monitor item, and those are some easy tricks on the tracker. Any questions about that? Okay. Now, what I recommend if you're getting started, as a tester, a really good way to get started is to just go through here and look at these items that need one test. You just use this needs one test query, and because these items typically are going to be the easiest ones to move. First of all, the ones that are almost done, so that they're kind of rewarding. Test it, and if everything goes smoothly, you can just change it to ready to commit, and we're done. And so that's a really good way to get started. Otherwise, if if you're a tester, then the other thing you can do is just look for any pendings. And again, I always recommend when you're getting started to start with something that you understand and is easy. Read through a few of them and find one that seems like it makes sense to you and is part of the program that you're familiar with. Okay. Okay, so the other thing that people seemed interested in was understanding how the workflow works with Git. Is that something that we should cover now? Let me pull up. Is everybody familiar with this page? This is a really important link. I'm going to paste it in here. This is an index to all of the articles in the wiki that are in the Bug Squad category. So if you're looking for information to help on Bug Squad stuff, this is the home page here to look at. So the document that I wrote recently is this one, Git for testers and trackers. And it basically just overviews the workflow and shows you how to set up a Git repository. The basic task, you got to get started. You got to set up a Git repository. Then you've got to be able to keep your local repository updated with changes from trunk, because obviously we're constantly committing change. And then for testing, we need to be able to apply patches and or pull requests so that we can test before the patch and then afterwards. And then the other thing we need to be able to do is to reset files back to the unmodified state so that we know how to so we get back to ground zero so we can test the next thing. Okay, so how many people here are using Eclipse and eGit versus using the command line? Who's using which?
I'm still using NetBeans.
Okay, so you're using it through NetBeans?
No, I haven't gotten into Git at all.
Oh, okay.
I'm so lost that way.
Okay.
I'm kind of like JM, although I think he's on Git now.
Yeah. Okay, who else is anybody else using Git right now? Okay, so Eclipse and Aptam is probably very similar to Eclipse as far as, okay, and then Rune, you're using the command line. Okay, so does everybody know how to create the initial local repository?
No.
Okay, so basically when you go to GitHub, and you go to the Joomla CMS project, it gives you command line, it gives you a URL to use. So for example, if I want to use the Git protocol, and for testing and tracking, we don't need to have read-write privileges, and in fact we won't have read-write. We only need read-only. So if you click like the Git read-only, that gives you this URL, and then you would inside your folder where you want your project, you just create your repository with this command. It's not very clear here. Hang on, I gotta fix this. I got the code in the wrong place. That's better. With this git clone command. So basically this command here, oops, no, I'm having a hard time with the mouse. That's the command line version. That creates the local Git repository in whatever folder I'm currently in. And I got that URL from there. Okay, does that make sense? And you can do the same thing in Eclipse. It's a few more steps, but it's a little simpler. You basically right-click in the repositories view here, or actually click on this button, Clone and Git Repository, and then you would paste that URL, that same URL, there, and follow through. I've already done it, so I don't want to do it again. And follow through that, and that'll create the local repository. And then in Eclipse, you have to also then create a project like you would for other. So you go through that process, and then you create a project using that directory. Okay, so that's how you get the initial. That's how you get your initial repository, and then to keep that up to date, all you have to do is in the command line is make sure you're in the master branch, and we'll talk about branches in a minute. And then you just do git pull origin, and that'll pull in any new changes. And in Eclipse, it's even easier. You just can right click and go team pull. And if there were changes, it would show, and otherwise it shows everything's up to date. Okay, so we've talked about setting up the initial repository, and we've talked about how to keep it up to date with changes in trunk. Any questions about that? Everybody understand so far?
You still revert like you did with SVN?
Oh, and keeping it up to date. Any questions on that? Does that make sense to everybody? Does everybody kind of understand how version control works and what's going on? Okay, so now let's talk about. Okay, so this is important here. We're working right now. We still have a lot of old SVN formatted patches, as well as let me make this bigger. Here you can't read that. As well as the new Git format, and we can work with either one, and we just have to be aware of it. So a standard Git patch or a diff off of GitHub has this A/ and B/ in front of it, whereas the old SVN command patches. Oh, Jason's asking, should we do Git or SVN? And we should definitely be moving toward Git. I mean, if you're really comfortable with SVN and you don't want to learn Git, that's fine. You'll be able to do that for a while. But it's better, where the projects definitely move to Git, and that's definitely the direction we're going. So. The GitHub is the official repository at this point, and the SVN is just a mirror of that. And so we'll probably keep the SVN around. It doesn't hurt anything, but the official is Git, and more work is being done on GitHub. So I would encourage everybody to learn Git. And there's a learning curve, but the documentation now is a lot better. Also, let me add, if there's anything that's not clear in any of these documents, please, let me know or post something in the document itself or whatever, because we want these to be as clear as possible. And as I've been learning this stuff over the last few months, I've tried to document that, but it's a continuing battle. And some of these documents are fairly recent. So we can work with either of these patches, either with the A/B/ in front or not. If you're in Eclipse, you need to use a different option for applying the Git. So with Git, we have the option locally of we can just work with patches, just like you did with SVN, where you just patch something and then revert it, patch it again, revert it. Or you have the option of working with branches. And it's real easy in Git to create and delete branches. So if you're doing a lot of testing of different issues, it's probably worth learning about branches. But if you're just testing things one at a time, it's certainly not essential. So applying patches with Eclipse or NetBeans is the same whether it's Git or SVN. It doesn't matter. It's the same commands. And on the command line, you can apply a patch just with Git apply and then the name of the file. If it's an SVN format patch, so it doesn't have the A and the B, you have to add this argument -P0. So I Git apply -P0 my patch file. And then at that point, your code changes, are made to your local repository. You test and see if the patch applies, and then see if it fixes the problem or not. And then with Eclipse, you do. Let's find an issue here. So what you'll see in a lot of issues now is there's no patch file. There's just a URL. So, and in this case, he's added the .diff to the URL. If there isn't a .diff, then you add that yourself. And when I go to that URL, what I'm going to see is basically a patch file. And it's going to be in the Git format, so it has the A/ and the B/ in front of it. So with Eclipse, if I was doing this at the command line, I would save this to a file and then use the commands I showed you. In Eclipse or NetBeans or Aptana, you could copy it to the clipboard, and then you just go right-click, team, apply patch. And now notice I'm getting some things that don't apply, and that's because I'm not ignoring any leading segments. So if I say ignore leading segments 1, now I get my my nice icon showing it's going to apply. And one of the cool things about an IDE like this is that I can click on any of these files and see all of the changes before I even apply the patch. So these are new files. I can see what's been changed. So here we've added a new method, and so on. And then I can hit finish to apply that. Okay. So that's what that was. Okay, and then basically, typically the next thing I need to do in my workflow is to put things back to normal. And this is where gets a little bit more of a pain than SVN was. Although I'll show you if you use branches, it's a lot easier. So if on my command line now, I'm in the same folder. Or one very important point I didn't make earlier is that you can mix and match command line and IDE Git commands. They do exactly the same thing, and so you can mix and match any way you want. So for example, because I applied that patch, if I do Git status now on the command line, I'll see all of these things have been modified in my folder now, my folders. So now, to reset things, there's basically two stages to reset things in Git. First of all, to undo all the modifications to files, you do Git, I'm blanking here, Git reset, and then you do a hard reset, and that will just automatically undo any files that were changed. But if I do my Git status, I still have these new files. So the ones that were changed have gone back to, they're not showing up anymore, but the new ones are still there. So there's a second command, which is git clean, and I do F to clean any new files and D to clean any new directories. And then now my Git status should be clean. And if you're in an IDE, you can do the reset. So now if I, in Eclipse, my little, that little decorator goes away, showing me that now everything's clean. In the IDE, in Eclipse, you can go team reset and then hard, and that's the same thing as the first one we did. I don't think in eGit there's any comparable thing for the clean. I think you have to basically just delete the files manually, or else use this clean command. Okay? So basically the workflow there was applying a patch and then basically unapplying it. Now I'm going to show you a trick that you can do in Eclipse. There's a trick you can do as a shortcut. Go back to this guy. Copy that in. You can basically unapply. You can reverse apply a patch. So first I'm going to apply it again. I remember I have to click this 1 because I couldn't find a way to make that default. It'd be nice if they could default that to 1. But so I'm back to where I've got these changes. If I still have the patch, if I now want to go back to the basic thing, before I applied the patch, I can do the apply patch again. Again, I do the 1. And now if I click this reverse patch, it basically applies the patch in reverse. And now I'm back to where I was again. So my Git status should be clean here.
What terminal is that, Mark?
Pardon?
What terminal is that? Is that just a standard file?
No, this is on Windows. You install this shell.
Right.
That gets installed when you. But yeah, it's the bash shell.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Jason's slightly confused with reset. Well, basically the reset undoes any changes that were made to files. So a hard reset will set all your files back to the same state that they were in the repository. But what it doesn't do is if you've created new files or new folders as part of the patch, reset doesn't delete those. That's why you need the clean. Okay. it resets to the same as your local repository. So basically, your local repository is a copy or a clone of what's out at GitHub. And when you initially set up the local repository, it's an exact copy of that. But then as soon as somebody commits something to GitHub, your local repository is out of date. So that's why we did the git pull origin or the team pull. So if you do that, once a day, or if you haven't worked on anything in a few days, you do that at the beginning of every work cycle, then you know that your local repo is up to date with GitHub. Does that make sense?
Well, that's what we used to do the SVN. We remove any modifications and then do an update.
Right, and it'd be the same thing. So let me talk now a little bit about branches, because that's where GitHub is pretty cool and this is maybe a little bit more advanced, but it's also really handy. If let's say I was working on 3 or 4 different issues in the tracker at the same time, and with SVN, that's a real pain in the neck. You've got to remember which one you're working on, and did I have the patch applied or not, or whatever. And with Git, all I need to do is create a new branch. So, for example, with Eclipse, if I go switch to new branch, I can just call my new branch issue 1 or whatever. Let's say I'll call it issue 28632. And so now I've switched to a new branch, and now if I apply the patch, so if I go out, I don't know if this is the right one, but let's just say this is the patch I wanted. So now, if I apply this patch here, now I can go team commit. Now the important thing is I'm only committing to my local repository. I'm not committing to, back to GitHub. And in fact, I wouldn't normally have permission to commit back to that. I check these new files. So now I've got a branch with that patch committed. And now if I want to switch back to master, I just go team switch to master, and I'm right, and I'm back to master. So now if I want to test with the patch or without the patch, I just switch my branches. Okay, so Bear, what didn't see how to create a branch? What'd you miss?
I saw a new branch, and that was it.
Okay, so it was team, switch to, and then new branch.
Right, that's the last thing I saw.
Okay, yeah, and then you put in the name of the new branch, and then that switches you to the new branch. Now, since I've created that, I can go switch to issue 28362. What's the matter there? And now I'm at the new branch, and I could test there, and then go team, switch to master. So you just need to keep track of which branch you're on. And then the cool thing is, if I'm done with that issue, I just go team, advanced, delete branch, and it's like that branch never existed. So it makes
Are we having to install like we used to have to from SVN?
Well, whether you install, yeah, whether you install Joomla or not depends on the nature of what you're testing. You know, sometimes you need a new installation to test the feature. Other times, you know, if it's not changing the database, you know, then you don't need a new install.
Well, what I mean is when we do the initial pull,
Yeah,
we need to run the install. And then what about when we branch? We need to run the install again?
No, not unless
Okay.
you'd only need to do an install if you would whatever you would have had to do for a patch, that's what you'd have to do with the branch.
Okay.
The branch is exactly like applying a patch. It's just that it's saving that patch in its own branch, so then you can switch in and out really quickly, really easily. And so, for example, if you had an issue with if you were doing a complicated thing that had maybe 2 or 3 different proposed patches, you could create a branch for each one of those patches and then compare them and test them and switch back and forth real easily.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's really nice, and you just got to be careful. For example, when you do your pull, you want to make sure you're back on your master branch to do your pull, because that's the one you will never want to make changes in your master branch. You always want to make changes in one of your other branches.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, well, when you reset, okay, so Jason, if you're using the branch approach, you wouldn't reset normally. When you're done with that, if you're trying to test like if you're using a branch, then when you're testing before and after, you just test in the master for the before and in the branch for the after. The reason you would do a reset is if you were just applying patches in your master branch and then you needed to reset your branch to ground zero. So the nice thing about, so basically, if you apply the patch and then commit it in the branch, then you don't need to mess with reset. You just switch back to master. And basically from the command line, you know, there's instructions in the wiki. Obviously you can work with branches at the command line. You just use get branch to create it, commit to commit your changes, and then get checkout to switch from one branch to another. So get checkout master would switch you back to master. Exactly. Yeah, that's what reset does. It set things back. So if you're in master, it sets things back to what they were in the repo. So basically, I would encourage you, if you're going to be doing a lot of this, it's probably worth at least trying out, you know, playing with branches, because that's really the strength of Git is that makes it really easy to create as many branches as you want and then delete them when you're done with them, and it and makes it really easy to switch back and forth real quickly. Okay. So the other thing that sometimes you need to do, and this is a little bit more advanced, but one of the other things you need to do sometimes is try to figure out when a bug was introduced. And in Eclipse here, if I go team, show, and history, I get this really cool history view of every change that's happened. And it's all I have to do to switch to an older version is say checkout, right click and checkout. And this is real similar to the way it worked in SVN as well. So now I'm back here as of, you know, yesterday, you know, whatever commit this was. And you can go back and forth and test things. And you can do the same thing from the command line. You just check out, and you have to refer to the commits using this. Let's see if I can get it so you can read it. Using this ID column here, which is a hash, and you usually only need the first 8 to get a unique thing. So that's a lot of information, but that's trying to cover kind of the basic workflow that you would use with Git or with eGit, to do the basic. Okay, well that's everything that I had about that I could think of to cover about Git. I mean, obviously there's a lot more advanced stuff once you get into coding, but you have to walk before you can run. And if you learn this well, then the additional stuff for coding isn't too bad. You just got to learn how to work with a fork at GitHub. Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, people have opinions about IDEs. I've used Eclipse and NetBeans a lot. I haven't used any of the others. Both Eclipse and NetBeans, as far as I can tell, do a great job. NetBeans has probably got a little bit better standard documentation. It's a little easier to get started with, but they both do all the basics. And then I think Aptam is a Eclipse derivative. I don't know. So I think it's just a more polished version of Eclipse. And I haven't used PHP Storm, but people seem to like it. I think they all do, the same basics. Yeah, I'm sure that Aptam does everything here, and it's probably some more stuff as well. Okay.
Well, I know for a while we were all kind of moving to NetBeans because Eclipse, I guess, had a real bad memory leak, and now everybody's kind of like Aptena and Storm. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's just what people learn. I mean, I learned Eclipse back in Java, so to me that's always been the most comfortable one. But I've used NetBeans enough to feel very comfortable with that, and it's the PHP project in NetBeans is probably a little bit better supported. The PHP project in Eclipse is a little bit comes and goes. But so the current version of Eclipse with Git is very solid as far as I can tell. It works pretty well. The previous version was pretty shaky on Git. It was better to use the command line. But I think any of them, basically work. I would, if somebody was new right now starting, I'd probably steer them to NetBeans just because I think it's a little less of a learning curve to get started. There's better documentation, but that's a hard one. I definitely feel very strongly that it's better to use an IDE than not, but that's just, again, my own personal opinion.
Yeah, I'd be lost about NetBeans, to be honest.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, with respect to GitHub, we still need to make a tracker item to go with the pull request. Yes, okay, that's a very important question. And yes, the answer is the issue tracker, or if we're talking about bugs, or the feature tracker if we're talking about new features. Those are still the essential point of control for that issue, for that feature. So it's fine to put the code on GitHub in a pull request or a diff on GitHub, or it's fine to make a patch. But in either case, since the tracker is the central place where everything is kept track of, and things won't get tested. Nobody will know about it to test it and to push it through the process if there isn't a tracker. And at some point, we may change trackers, but we'll still need something with similar functionality so that, because the beauty of the tracker is that everybody knows where to look. If I want to go in and do some testing, I know I just pull up the tracker, pull up the pending items, and boom, that's everything that needs testing. So that is the point of truth, and that will continue to be the point of truth. But the code can certainly go on GitHub, and that's where most people are doing their coding now. Personally, I still think it's easier to just create a patch file and post it, but it doesn't matter if it's a patch file posted to the tracker or just a URL link to GitHub. Either one works great. Does that answer the question? Great. Anybody else have any questions? Did everybody get what they wanted out of the webinar?
So far. I'd like to see a lot more of these starting from the coding standpoint.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? If anybody's got any suggestions for specific topics they'd like to cover in webinars, let's start a thread on the Bug Squad Google group, and if we get several people who are interested in the topic, we can find somebody to present it. That's not a problem.
Maybe walk through Andrew's book or Andrew's course.
Well, yeah, that
may be he finished it.
That may be asking a lot, but yeah, let's start a topic. Yeah, running the test, like the unit test or the system test, or both. Yeah. Okay. We've done a webinar. There's actually a couple webinars out there on system tests. Have you looked at those? There's links to them on the Bug Squad list. The unit tests are a little bit more of a little bit different, but you might want to take a look at the webinars. They're out there for the system test. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Yeah, so that these two webinars here, running system tests for Joomla Part 1 and Part 2, Matt Thomas and I did those. Gosh, I don't know when that was. It might have been 2 years ago now.
I was going to say that was back in 1.6, I think.
Yeah, but everything in there is still, it hasn't changed, I don't think, or at least the basic thing hasn't changed. But yeah, getting PHP unit, that'd be a good topic. That's more of a platform thing. That'd be a real good one to do, and I bet Michael might be quite willing to do that. So let's get a thread started on the Google group, and we can get, if we get interest and people want to do it, we definitely have people that can do do the webinars. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I think we'll call this good, and hopefully we learned some stuff, and we'll be doing this again at the second time, but probably cover more or less the same material. But if anybody wants to come to the other one, you're welcome to come to that one as well. Okay, thanks, folks, and goodbye for now.